Welcome to The Ordinary American. I'm your host, Paul Sarkis. About 4 hours ago, Donald Trump did what Donald Trump does so well. He truth socialed the fact that the Iranians had asked him for a ceasefire, just for the whole world to see. And getting back to what RFK Jr. said about him, which we went over yesterday, which was that Donald Trump understands power better than anybody he knows, Donald Trump responded, I assume officially, but also over truth, only like Trump can do, that he'll consider it once the straits are open. But until then, bombs away. He's unbelievable. All right, this is The Ordinary American. We are an anti-leftist show. We discuss all things faith, freedom, and MAGA. Because we're anti-leftist, we are anti-Democrat. Voting for Democrats is breaking yourself into jail, and what's worse, you're breaking other people into jail without their consent, and I know you leftists like consent. And it's not with their consent, and we can see this as we see the people leaving California, New York, Massachusetts, Illinois, with their money. They're all the same people who created that single party rule in those various states. Why don't they stay once they get what they wanted? Buyer's remorse? Anyways, that's our show, and we'll be getting into some of that stuff. But today I named the show the Edward the Longshanks immigration policy, birthright citizenship. Why Edward the Longshanks? Well, if you remember the great movie Braveheart, or history, Edward the Longshanks, tall guy, was really brutal on the Scots to try to get them out of Scotland. And he had that famous line in Braveheart where he said, if we can't get them out, we'll breed them out. Now, he used a brutal method where he did a decree that allowed his nobles to rape Scottish women on the first night of their marriage. I think if he had known about birthright citizenship and seen what the leftists have done here in America, he would have reverted to that policy. On this show, we deal with things from an ordinary American's point of view. There's lots of great content out there about the very specific legal aspects of this, and it's a legal issue, so that's important. But we try to mostly address things from a practical point of view. How does it affect us when we do our stuff on Bitcoin? Just why should I buy it? We skip over some of the hash rate stuff and technical stuff, just why should I buy it? You know, we look at the world through a practical lens. Edward the Longshanks. From a practical lens, as Trump says so well, it's ridiculous. No country allows birthright citizenship. Oversimplified, it means that anyone can arrive on your shore, have a baby, and the baby is a citizen. That's it. That math obviously does not work, certainly unless you have an absolute closed border, but eventually it will break. That makes no sense. For example, Putin and Xi could impregnate their wives. I think Xi has one, I don't think Putin does, but whatever. Impregnate somebody, come over for a state dinner, have a C-section, have the kid, it's an American citizen. Now, Putin's kid and Xi's kid is an American citizen too? That makes no sense. Some of the leftists will be screaming, there's an exemption for diplomats and for military people. There are, but go check it. It would not apply to the heads of state. It's an insane law. It encompasses two scams. There's always a scam with the left. Nothing's on the level. It encompasses two scams we're going to go over. Okay, the first scam is the precedent scam. And the second scam, I don't know a good word for it, so I'm going to use the overused word of gaslighting, but it's like the repetition scam. We'll get into both. Okay, the precedent scam. The precedent scam is some corrupt judge or some corrupt judges or regulators or something make something law, and then the left starts screaming precedent, precedent, precedent. We don't want to break precedent. We can't change precedent, precedent, precedent. As if precedent had to override common sense, decency, justice, godliness. It does not. I used yesterday or the day before, 2 days ago, we talked a little bit about Dred Scott, the very famous case. Some people wanted to quibble with me on how I laid it out. You are right. It is not approving and legalizing slavery. Slavery was already legal. My point was from a practical matter. The Dred Scott case did not slow down or put barriers in the place of slavery. Or said a different way, all the Northerners and the slaves themselves wanted Dred Scott to win that case. 7-2, he lost. The 7 were Democrats, the 2 were Republicans. They were forwarding and pushing slavery forward. Why am I mentioning that? Because that was a terrible decision. We all agree on that now. That shouldn't have happened. Even lefties would agree that we should not have had slavery at all, so we certainly shouldn't have voted 7-2 in favor. But that's a precedent. That's an example that even 7 people together can make a bad decision. Precedent doesn't mean anything if it's an unjust law, corruption, ungodly, a whole bunch of things. Just because a group of people voted for it doesn't mean that it's right. And that's the best example I can give. Slavery. It was legal. Does that mean precedent? Shouldn't change it? No, of course not. So that's one scam the left uses, is the precedent scam. The second scam is a little bit more insidious. What ends up happening is they end up lying, but there's enough truth in the lie that if you do maybe first order thinking, it pans out. What do I mean by that? Right now, many on the Democrat side, many on the left side, they are saying this is settled law. The courts have decided this. That is not true. The courts have never decided, the Supreme Court has never decided this particular issue, ever. They've talked about other issues, there have been executive orders, there have been regulations. They've never decided this particular issue. So this will be the first time. Trump's going to it, by the way. That's what I read. I don't know if he's there now. I can't remember. I didn't see before I went on what was happening. But good for him. He should. It's that important. If I saw the numbers right, in 1980, the percentage of babies born to foreign-born mothers was about 6.5%. And by 2025, it was a shade below a quarter, or 25% of all babies. That's the Edward the Longshanks. That is breeding them out. We know that there are hundreds of thousands probably of Chinese women who have been paid to get pregnant, come over here on whatever the 8th month, wait, have the child, get the paperwork, head home, and in some number of years that guy's coming back, or that woman's coming back here to claim citizenship. You do enough of that over time and you lose your country. You're bred out. Edward the Longshanks. This is the stupidity of this, Edward the Longshanks. So the 2 scams that they use are precedent, and they just sort of start screaming things, and that's why I say it's sort of like the repeat it or gaslighting, overused, but they just sort of repeat, and then everybody just accepts it. That particular scam has an even more insidious tail to it. What's the tail? When, hopefully, the Supreme Court decides the right way, which is that the 14th Amendment did not mean anybody who set foot on American soil could have a kid and it be an American citizen. It was anybody who was already under the jurisdiction of the United States. It was, as Trump says, for slaves. It's because the Dred Scott case was an abomination. They were clarifying it. Now, the tale is that when the court hopefully rules in Trump's favor, our favor, that the only people who can be automatic American citizens are American citizens who have children, and those children. When the decision is made and it comes out in our favor, there's a whole group of people who have bought hook, line, and sinker this notion that it's settled law, that precedent holds, that it's already been decided. that the court's already ruled, and then they're going to start in with this in an illegal court, and we have to pack the Supreme Court. They build the anger and the resentment so that people are going to go and do stupid things. Riot is what we've seen in the past. Instead of telling them the truth. Here would be the truth, which they can't say. Hey, everybody. No, the 14th Amendment does not really allow birthright citizenship or the Longshanks immigration policy. You can't just show up here, have a baby, and have the baby be a citizen, which, by the way, then means the mom's going to eventually become a citizen too, and then maybe the family. No, you can't do that. But we want that because we're going to use those people to corrupt the elections. So be with us. They wouldn't get elected. It's all the leftist scam. All right, so this is the Longshanks immigration policy. Trump is right. It can't exist. It doesn't exist. There's been some great legal stuff. John Eastman does some great stuff. Wall Street Journal, surprisingly, has some good stuff on it. I'll bet, although I haven't read it, Jonathan Turley has written some good stuff on it. Probably shouldn't say that till I read it, but my guess is he has. It was not meant to allow foreigners to come in and have babies here. I can remember when I was a kid, I was probably maybe 6th grade, and I heard this, and I thought to myself, holy cow, all you got to do is get here, like just organize your, that was a 6th grader. I was thinking, organize your vacation around the birth of your child, and then your child gets the greatest gift, well, second greatest gift in the world, American citizenship. And then I used to think to myself, that can't be right, can it? That makes no sense. Yeah, it makes no sense. Okay? Edward the Longshanks. He didn't dream of breeding them out in such a specific and machine-like fashion. But that's what's happening. Let's hope it goes well. Okay, we're going to move on to some other things. I do mention this a couple of times. I'm going to keep mentioning because it's important. We don't have any sponsors yet, maybe someday, but All Family Pharmacy is a pharmacy that I use for ivermectin. I just finished up a 5-day course of ivermectin, and I got it from All Family Pharmacy. I highly recommend it. They have great prices. It was easy to get through the process. Use the website, and we're finding out more and more that ivermectin by itself is a heck of a tool, not only to get rid of parasites, but to get rid of cancers. I'm just a guy in front of a flag who loves God, his family, and his country. I'm not a doctor, but I'm also not brain dead. So when I see information out there, and I see that ivermectin and fenbendazole and mebendazole are curing people, I get super curious because I would like to be in a world where the cure could be that simple. Having seen a mom and a dad both die from complications related to bad cancers, it would have been great if they could have just taken ivermectin and been well. Okay, All Family Pharmacy. And we may come back to that because there's some new things on there. All right. So I mentioned before that Trump announced that the Iranians asked for a ceasefire. It has become like a sport that when he says one thing, all the doomers and everybody else got to say the other thing. If Trump says that we got to go into Iran, suddenly everybody's against going into Iran, despite the fact that they were all for going into Iran for 20, 30 years. All the presidents mentioned it. Obama, Clinton, Bush, all of them. We can't allow them to get a nuke. We can't allow them to get a nuke, etc. So he goes and does it. This is just like the Israeli embassy being moved. All presidents for my lifetime said, we're going to move the embassy to Jerusalem. That's where it should be. Nobody did it. He did it. Before he did it, he was told, and after he did it, this will be World War III. The Middle East will implode. This is the end of Israel. All heck is going to break loose. Well, I'm looking around. Doesn't look like that happened. They were wrong. Trump isn't right all the time. Shocking to hear myself say that. But he's right most of the time. Let's wait and see on Iran What he is doing is he's trying to change the way, it's a changing kind to the way the world has run over the last, certainly since World War II. And as I went over in detail yesterday, Promethean Action does great work on this. The English have been controlling our foreign policy for a long time. The Israelis do not control us, but the British have been controlling us. They've been using us to have and start the endless wars, which creates chaos, which allows them to extract wealth, certainly from Iran and the Middle East, and get up to all sorts of no good. Relatively speaking, they keep their country peaceful. Other peoples are suffering with tremendous chaos and endless wars. Trump is changing that. How is he changing that? He's stripping out the big global organizations and going one-on-one, sovereign country to sovereign country, which is why he was able to resolve, is it 8 wars or conflicts in the first year he was back in office? I think it was 8, 7 or 8, over in Africa and Southeast Asia, all sorts of places, because he went country to country and he put commerce over conflict. So he announced it on Truth. I talked about that too. It's great that he can just talk to the people. Now he's going to give a speech at the White House tonight. And I just happen to wonder if that Truth Social was foreshadowing some ceasefire announcement tonight. Don't know. And then I did laugh, and I shared it earlier. He didn't say bombs away. That was my words. But he did say like bombing the heck out of them until the straits are opened. Let's find out. You will notice on this show, I am not somebody who rushes to say Trump's an idiot, Trump's wrong, Trump's this, Trump's... I think just the opposite. I think he's right. I think he's been right, and he's been consistent. And that's going to get us to our next topic. Trump is not the, I'm laughing because it's a funny episode, the Homer Simpson, I guess, what would I call it? The Homer Simpson model of living a life. Do you remember that great episode where he's eating crap and Marge says to him, hey, you better be careful. Or somebody said, I don't know if it was Marge, you better be careful, like you're going to ruin your health. And he says, that's not a problem for today, Homer. That's a problem for Homer 20 years from now. I mean, that is the Democrat Party. Let's bring some proof. Okay. 2014, Mussolini, he was the lieutenant governor at the time, I believe. And there was a speech that's going around now. You can see it on social media. I've linked to it. By the way, The Ord American on X. The Ordinary American at proton.me. Send us emails if you got questions or follow-ups or you want any extra information on some of the things we talk about. And most everything will be in that X thread. Mussolini, 2014, has a speech where he basically says the high-speed rail is a joke. It's not going to work. You know, essentially saying it's stupid. Why? Because 2014 Mussolini needed a topic that he could look like he was restraining government and coming in and being an adult in the room saying this doesn't work. Roll the film forward today and he's still touting it. Well, why the change? Well, why the change? Because Democrats need the scams, A, to steal our money, and B, to forward their power. And they do that by stealing our money. If you got rid of that high-speed rail, you're going to lose a huge window of scamability. There is so much scam that can go on with that. First of all, whatever it is, $25 billion or something that's been spent. Okay? No track laid. Just imagine the consultants and the advisors and the nonprofits. And just imagine if Doge ever went in and audited that, what we might find. When you're the 2014 candidate Mussolini, you don't want that. You want to come across as against that. Once you get in, the now elected Mussolini, he wants the scamability. So he's now in favor of it. I mentioned the reference the other day to the COVID vaccine. When Trump was in office and he was touting, we're going to have a vaccine, we're going to have a vaccine. By the way, there's a great example of a topic I was against. I was never going to get the vaccine. he got lucky, or divine intervention, I guess, that the Democrats took it over. But the Democrats were all saying in this great video of Halfwit Harris and Dopey Joe saying, I'm not taking the Trump vaccine. And then as soon as they said they won, everybody take the vaccine. See how that works? Back and forth. The 2014 Mussolini wanted to come across as restricting government corruption. The today Mussolini wants the corruption. The 2020 pre-election Democrats wanted to come out against the COVID vaccine because it looked like they were standing up to Trump. Post-election, when they thought they won, they want to be for it because it's a control factor for us. Never forget what they did to us during COVID. By the way, any of you Democrats listening, this is if there's no other reason, this is one reason you should never vote Democrat. They dumped sand in skate parks and put funny things on basketball hoops so kids couldn't play outside. They arrested the dude from the ocean when the closest thing to him was not a human, but was probably a shark. They arrested him because he was outside. That's the Democrat Party. That's how they thought then. All right, one more example of this. There's a great piece, Bernie Sanders, Mr. Lefty. He used to be for workers, for worker rights, for getting worker pay up, etc. 2015, there's a great video where he talks about open borders. 2015, by the way, is not that long ago. I didn't look at the exact date, so I don't know if Trump had announced or not announced. I bet you he hadn't announced. And I'll tell you why. Bernie Sanders is talking about open borders. He says that's a Republican thing. They want open borders to keep labor costs low for the big corporations, hurting the little guy, hurting the people. By the way, Bernie was right. That is the net effect of open borders. That is the net effect. It lowers wages, certainly at the bottom end of the wage scale, for sure. And there are a lot of corporations who like that. He was right. 2015, Bernie had that point of view. Whoops. Today, Bernie's opened the borders, Bernie. Keep them all coming in. Illegals are us. They're the best of us. Blah, 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 blah. All the leftist stuff. Why? Because now that's the grift. Now that's the scam. Now they need those illegals on the voter rolls. That's the Bart Simpson political theory. What's appropriate then for them, they then switch and they've got a different idea. I'll contrast that, the great Dan Bongino, always mentioning political contrasts, with Trump, who wrote a book in 2012 about not allowing Iran to have nuclear weapons. The book wasn't about that, but it was part of the book. He gave some interview, I forget who was with, it's been making the rounds, where he says, no, we should not let them have nukes, and in fact, we should go in and take out a price in terms of oil for all the death they've caused to Americans. That's the same point of view he has today. He did not do the Homer Simpson. He did not do the Homer Simpson. He has the same point of view. Obviously, nukes should not be allowed by a murderous, crazy, fanatical regime. By the way, on my thread on X, there's a great 1.5 or 2 minutes by Marco Rubio explaining this. It's very simple and it's very commonsensical. Contrast that again with the very complex and hard to understand Obama-Iran plan, where somehow if we give them billions of dollars, which we're told was their money, which it wasn't, might have been the Iranian people's money, but it wasn't the mullah's money. But we were told it was the Iranian money and the mullahs got it, and somehow giving them a whole bunch of money, even though they're funding terrorism all over the world, would bring peace. Do you see how that's complicated? That doesn't work, obviously. It's meant to confuse us. Trump's version is simple. They're a murderous regime. They've got this Shia existential, I don't care if I die, I'll kill anybody else version. You can't give them a nuclear weapon. And as Rubio says in that video, if they wanted nuclear energy, there are ways to get nuclear energy, and everybody was fine with that. But you don't need to put nuclear energy 50 stories below a mountain out of sight and prevent people from seeing it. And you don't need the same type or type of uranium, enriched uranium. That was all really complicated, that Obama stuff. Trump stuff is simpler. No nukes, no nukes. That's it. That's it. Okay, so that was the sort of the Homer Simpson, like back then one thing, today another. Trump's been consistent, and I say this all the time. Go back and watch that 2015 speech, or was it 2016 when he came down the escalator? It looks like he's giving it today. Well, he doesn't look that way because he's aged, but the topics are, the content. Okay, by the way, there's no bruiser in here today, so we're free from those kinds of external sounds. All right, there's been a topic I've wanted to bring up for a while. There's something called the Smith-Mundt Act. Back in the post-World War II era, when we started to really flex our CIA-type spy manipulation muscles, we realized that there were ways we could manipulate other countries through information. And we could affect the people voting. We could affect them in a way that it could get elected people that we liked, which meant that we controlled them. We realized that that was a potential problem because if we could do it there, we could do it here. And there was something called the Smith-Mundt Act. Now it's super complex, and I'm not going to get all into it, but essentially what it says is we can't use that CIA tactic of using information warfare to manipulate the population here. Why do I bring it up? Obama essentially went in like 2012 it was, and tried to water it down, essentially so we could use it here. And he made huge progress and did water it down. Okay, but what we see here now is remnants of this, where they're using, let me finish the thought, they're using the ability to get us information or demoralize us or convince us of something to affect the way we might vote. That's what the left calls disinformation. And in a funny, ironic twist, they consider the truth to be disinformation. What do I mean? Remember the laptop from hell? Is that Amanda Devine or Miranda Devine's book? I think it was. The laptop from hell. Hunter's laptop, in the 50-something intelligence community, people came out and wrote a letter saying, "Now this is Russian disinformation." They knew that they were lying. That's probably a violation of this Smith-Mundt Act. We can't use that government stuff to try to affect the way we vote. Obama watered it down to make that stuff more legal. It's my understanding, hating the experts, but it's my understanding that he wasn't able to eliminate it altogether, and that some of that is still very much illegal. Some of it is not, which is why they can do it. It's something to be aware of when you see this stuff coming through either government directly or the government agents in the press. We saw that ruling, I think it was from Missouri a few weeks ago, having to do with manipulating the press or coercing the press. And there's a clip of Zuckerberg going around where Zuckerberg describes that the Democrats, the Biden White House, would call and pressure them all the time to take certain people down off their platform. That can't happen. That can't happen. That's part of the scam I mentioned earlier with the Longshanks immigration policy, where the Democrats will just say, settled law. And then everybody sort of says, hey, they said it was settled law. It's settled law. How could we do that? They just overruled precedent, and they get everybody jacked up. That's disinformation. That's the CIA tools of trying to do color revolution or affect our process here in the United States. Okay, that's, unfortunately, some of that's legal now because Smith-Mundt was changed and some of it wasn't. Some of it isn't legal, but they're still doing it. And in fact, I forget the name of the organization, but they had some crazy regulatory person that was going to be in charge of information, the information czar, if you remember that under Biden. Just crazy. These are the kinds of scams that we don't see under Trump. He gets on Truth and just truths things out. Now, we're going to find out at some point if there's going to be a ceasefire or not. He didn't say there was going to be a ceasefire. He said they asked for one. I'm sure that they wrote a X post or something saying, no, we didn't. We'll see tonight what happens. We'll see tonight. We'll get more information. But he just Truth Socials it out. Says it. Nobody accuses Trump of saying too little. And so he talks to reporters all the time, one-on-one. He Truth Socials out. He is constantly communicating with us. Okay? Or as Robert Kennedy says, he understands the use of power. That's power, communicating with us. Whether, if you don't like Trump, you've got to know him a lot. Now, what you know of him, you don't think you like, but you do know him. And those of us who voted for him and like him, like what we know. But that's using power. Robert Kennedy, would understand that given his family. So I wanted to mention that Smith-Mundt Act. Keep your eye on it. Let's see where that goes. And let's see if we see the great Mike Benz. If you don't follow him on X, he's very much worth the follow. He's a former, I can't remember if it's State Department or CIA employee, and the guy pulls out documents and shows us sort of the skeleton of what's going on in our government, unlike anybody else. Mike Benz, B-E-N-Z. I highly, highly recommend it. Okay, so that was another thing. I did mention the great pre-April Fool's joke. I think it's April Fool's joke. I don't know. I think so. That Oprah tried to bribe Fetterman with $20 million. That's crazy. All right, a couple of other quick things. And it is Holy Week, so we want to do a little spirituality because this is a spiritual battle. Brandon Johnson, the mayor of Chicago, whose approval rating is something like 6% or 5% or 8%. Not good. Not good. An approval rating should at least be in double digits. So he, like most of the Democrats, are just not going to change their policies. In fact, they're doubling down. And one of the things that young people especially, but many people who want to vote left or try to vote left or are voting Democrat constantly do, is they constantly try to label a capitalist as greedy. And there's the great clip of Milton Friedman answering this question from Phil Donahue. By the way, if you want to see one of the great heads of hair of all time, Phil Donahue, holy cannoli, does he have a head of hair? You got to see it. Now it was the 70s or early 80s, but still, very envious. Anyways, he says to Milton Friedman, but don't you ever worry about the greed of the capitalist system? And Milton Friedman says, you don't think there's greed in the communist system? Of course there's greed. There's greed everywhere. Everybody's greedy. And I bring this up a lot. Brandon Johnson, I'm going to bring this up now. He spent, or the city, the taxpayers spend 22.5 million a year in security for him. Now, yes, the mayor should have some security. We don't want our mayors to get killed, absolutely. But $22.5 million? That seems preposterous to me. I don't get that. But that's greed. He's got to okay that. Now, my strong suspicion and I'm a cynic about these things when it comes to the left and the government, is that there's a big chunk of that is a scam. So it's not really that he has, 1,000 cops around him at all time to prevent, crime happening to him. My guess is that there's scams. There's friends and associates and political donors and other people who have people on the payroll in that security department. But that's greed. How is that greed? He's not taking that money. It's going to other people. It's greed because he's not thinking about where it comes from. He's paying it to people. Some of those people are doing a good job and are doing a job, not 22.5 million. At some number, I don't know what the number is, over 2 million, over 5 million, over some number, that just becomes selfish and abusive to the taxpayer. That's greed. He's using that to forward his power in some way. All of these scams we see coming out of the Democrat-run states, and by the way, we haven't yet seen them come out of the Republican states, but we will. I'm reading a little bit out of Florida, and the best governors, and DeSantis is one of them, they will not shy away from it. They will pull it out, throw it under the bus. Why? Because they don't want the corruption. It is a net negative to them. The corruption is a net positive for Democrats. If you study economics, it's all about incentives. The corruption is a net negative for Republicans, which is why they want to remove it, or certainly some of them. Not the ones down in Congress, I will say. I'm more talking about governors. The corruption scams at the state levels, the SNAP scams, the autism scams, the daycare scams, the voter sign-up of the homeless people scams, the Medicare, Medicaid scams, the home health care worker scams. And by the way, what we don't know is what the left knows, which is all the rest of those scams. They all know about them. All those Democrats know about them. They just chose not to tell us because the incentive for them was it helped them gain power. That's greed. There's no holier than thou around greed, left to right. All humans are motivated by self-interest. The capitalist system just allows incentives to be aligned in a place where it can work for more people. On the left, it always has to be done in secret, in a hierarchy. The higher you get, when you get the power, then you can do it because it's oppressed versus oppressor. So we'll see about these scams coming out. I was just reading about something in California where because the Democrats have scammed and corrupted the election process in their state so much, they don't have a Democrat primary and a Republican primary. They used the opportunity that they had single party stated their state so badly with their single party that they did what they would call, I think they call it a jungle primary, or it's just a primary. And then the top two people run off. Why did they do that? Go back to the Homer Simpson political philosophy. Back 10, 15, 20 years ago when they implemented that, for that version of the Democrat Party in California, it was awesome. We'll get rid of the Republicans in the primary. They'll never get in the top two votes. We'll always have two Democrats run against each other. And by the way, that'll be a fake runoff. It will be nothing. We just maintain power. Flywheel. Homer Simpson of today finds out that eating is bad for him. The Democrat Party of today is finding out that corrupting the elections that way is bad for them. And now two Republicans might be the top two vote getters. And if that's the case, then after the primary, it's just going to be a Republican. And if that's the case, let's wait and see, because I think the elections there are super corrupted. But that kind of desperation might get them to do desperate things and really expose themselves. But that's greed. People think of greed as only like, I got to get extra money for myself. That's greed of power. And then all of the things that cascade down from that, all the commissions, all the NGOs, all the nonprofits, all of these scams. When we look and we see that there's some, doctor in Vegas who doesn't even know this is happening, and he's billing, 100 million in Medicaid or something, or hospice, whatever the scam is. Whoever is doing that is paying up the chain somehow. They're donating to people. It's all part of the corruption flywheel, and it is all greed. So I wanted to mention that notion of greed. So when young people are thinking about left versus right, they don't get hoodwinked into thinking that greed is only a right-wing something or only a conservative idea. Everybody on the left is greedy too. The capitalist system just gives us a better chance to try to make it work for everybody. That rolls me into something about healthcare. Trump has come out recently and said we should stop giving any of your tax dollars that are going to healthcare to the insurance companies or the healthcare industrial complex, and all the money should go directly to citizens. I went into AI and sort of tried to figure out what that would look like. It looks to me like it would be somewhere around $8,000 to $10,000 per person per year if we did that, and it would go into something like a health savings account, only to be used for our health. Why is that important? Healthcare is crazy out of control. Why? Because of what Milton Friedman described as the third-party payer system. I can spend money on myself. When I'm doing that, I'm very interested in the cost and the quality. I can spend my money on somebody else. I'm very interested in the cost, a little less interested in the quality. I can spend somebody else's money on me. I'm not interested in the cost, it's their money, but I am interested in the quality because I'm taking or eating or doing the thing. And then the fourth one is someone else is spending money on someone else. That's the government. They take our tax dollars and they spend it selfishly, greedily, to buy votes and get power. That's what happens in healthcare. That's exactly what happens in healthcare. So all of you young people, or any of you, but certainly young people who are getting convinced that single party pay or socialist medicine is better, it is not. It's worse. You're going to get worse outcomes. You're not going to be able to see doctors. It's going to get crazy expensive unless you're in that grift, which you'll get super wealthy probably. You're going to get it in the teeth. In Canada, you can do government-assisted suicide faster and with less friction than getting a hip replacement. Yes. If we take all of that money out of that industrial medical healthcare complex and just send it to us, and we get an account, and then it's up to us to spend it on a doctor, we roll it over, we can invest it. That's how we are going to develop a relationship with the doctor. Right now, you'll notice, we go in, they get the bulk of their money from the insurance company or the government. Who's their real relationship with? The insurance company and the government. We pay a little, maybe. That's not a real relationship. The real relationship should be what we saw in the old days, like the country doctor, one-on-one. I go in, they know I'm going to pay, I know I'm going to pay, they got to give me good service, they got to help me. And they know I can go to another doctor. And they got to figure out a solution. Everything gets corrupted when government touches it. Everything. It can't help itself because, as the founding fathers told us, men are not angels. Okay, so I wanted to briefly mention that because I'm seeing more and more stuff about healthcare and greed. It is, the left is greedy in an oppressor-oppressed way. All humans are greedy. But it yields more to corruption. By the way, the corruption we see in our market right now is not capitalism. It might be corporatism or crony capitalism. And that's an incentive because government takes over so much that the message is sent to the companies, pay us and we'll get you a deal like the health insurance companies. Pay us, come to us. I'm not going to get into it today, but I will another day. We're seeing this happen in the Bitcoin, stablecoin, crypto world. Pay us. We're going to control everything. Smaller government, small problem. Bigger government, big problem. All right. Holy Week. yes, I say it all the time, it seems somewhat odd sometimes to me that we celebrate this unbelievable week when Jesus died for our sins. But thank goodness he did. I read a lot nowadays about people who are definitely finding their way to the faith. And I heard this morning, which I thought was really something, and really, I mean, I've heard it before, but it hits me. If the resurrection is not true, then all of Christianity is not true. God died for our sins, and then he rose. He conquered death. He didn't conquer death like Lazarus or the girl or any of the people that Jesus brought back from the dead. It was wholly and completely different. If you've ever seen the great movie of Narnia or Lord of the Rings, Gandalf the Great, he dies and becomes more powerful. The White Wizard, those are all, or Aslan in the Narnia films when he dies and then he becomes even more powerful. And there's that great line where they say about Aslan, oh, he's not a tame lion. And this is a big week for Christians. If the resurrection didn't happen, it did happen. I believe it happened. I believe there's eyewitness accounts that have been recorded down through history, more than just a few of the apostles. There was over 500 people, probably more, that saw him. So we celebrate it because he died for our sins and I'm a sinner. The weight of that sometimes, when I take that in, is spectacular. And I am so grateful for it. He died for our sins. So as always, I say to people, just start praying. Just start talking to God. And during Holy Week, if you can, go to a mass or go to a service. There is something powerful about being in a room with other people who are either believing the same things you believe or wanting to believe them. I promise all you atheists, you'll meet along the way people who believe who have their moments of doubt. Okay? You'll meet them. It's a better way of life to believe. It's not going to be utopia because there isn't any. And this week, as we work towards the day of the resurrection, which is, again, I think it's sort of weird and ironic, Good Friday. I'm not going to get into the why, but that's, doesn't seem in many ways good, although it is. It's good for humankind. I hope everybody has a chance to find a relationship with God. Watch Charlie Kirk if you can. Okay, there are others. There's great stuff. I can't remember the guy's name, and I'm not vouching for all of his religious points of view, but he's a young guy, and I see it, I think, on Lake Point is the name of the mega church. But I watch him sometimes. I'm not a priest. I'm not a pastor. I'm not a theologian. I'm just a guy who's trying to hopefully build a better life each day. And the way I've been doing that is finding a relationship with God and getting closer. And I watch and listen to all of these scholars. I remember in I think it was high school, I was reading Paul Tillich and Friedrich Buechner. And I don't even really, I remember some of the big themes, but not the specifics. But no doubt those things seeped in. Take in information. Okay? All right, so that's the show today. It's Edward the Longshanks. We got to root for that Supreme Court to make the smart and obvious right decision. We won't find out, I don't think, until June. But Trump was there, I read. Let's see tonight about whatever he's going to say. And we'll be back here tomorrow to talk about it all through the lens of faith, freedom, and MAGA. I'm rooting for you. Please root for me.